All right. Well, hello there, everyone. It's Mazske Finance coming to you once again with a very special guest. So I'll let him say hi to y'all. And Dion, welcome to the Mazske Finance channel.
Howdy, Mark. Super happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Thank you, Dion. It's great talking to you. And if you want to, you've seen some of my interviews, I think. Just kind of go back in time a little bit. Tell us where Dion came from. And you can tell us as much as you want or as little as you want about yourself, and kind of lead it up to before you started your real estate adventure, if you would.
Sure. I grew up in Southern California, and I never saw us as homeless because we always had a house to live in, but we didn't own it or rent it. My parents would find empty houses. We would move in, fix the doors and windows, and kind of live there until the owner showed up and asked us who we were. And in my family, I consider myself to be one of the laziest people I've ever met because my brothers and my dad run tree services. I actually joined the Marine Corps because that was easier than working in tree work. My plan originally, when I was, that 18-year-old just walking out into the world, I thought I'll do 20 years Marine Corps, 20 years law enforcement, and then retire. And who isn't set if you have two pensions, right? And it's a good-looking retirement.
Right.
But after Desert Storm, the Marine Corps downsized. So job went away due to something outside of my control. In 2008, when the recession hit, I got laid off from a police department because when municipalities aren't making money, they have to control finances somehow. So I got laid off at the same time as a bunch of qualified officers. I got tired of my source of income being taken away due to things outside of my control. So I started real estate before I made that first purchase in this position. I was a single parent with 3 kids, found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce. And I, after getting laid off from the police department, started teaching how to drive semis at a truck driving school. And the wage at that point in time was $17 an hour. So that was my starting position before I looked at real estate.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I knew a lot of your story, but I didn't know the beginning there about how you grew up. But I have found, though, with a lot of successful investors, very few of them were born rich into rich families. Because you've been on Millennial Mike's channel. He kind of grew up on welfare, and others, Anna, Michael Zuber's channel, same thing. I grew up with a mom and dad, but I was one of 5 kids. My dad was a firefighter. So going back in the 70s, I can remember, getting groceries. My parents get groceries, and it's like, oh, yeah, we got food to eat. But then before we got groceries again, it's like there's almost no food left in the house, but we weren't poor, though. So.
Yeah, I think people that come from a really rich childhood actually have it a bit harder. My dad left when I was 8, and I remember working in the onion fields with my mom. We worked right next to each other, and I'd make 50 cents for every bag I filled. And if we had a successful month, we were able to, buy food, have gas, have a car. So when I turned 18 and moved out, if I had my own place and made enough money to eat, I'm successful. But if somebody's coming out of a childhood where their parents made millions and they grew up in Scottsdale with a mansion, what can that person do that comes close to the success they experienced when they were 15? So sometimes saying I come from a rough background or a poorer childhood makes it a little easier to succeed because almost anything that we do seems like success.
Right. That's very true. Because I look at myself sometimes, it still amazes me. It's like, wow, Mazske, you got, 20 some rentals now, and you moved to this nice house in Florida. How did that happen? But I've shared my story before. So why don't you, Dion, if you want to, why don't you go ahead, and you left us at, being what, $89,000 in debt and a single dad. So just kind of tell us how that led, and your job was $17 an hour, but how did that lead into you buying real estate then?
So I had a couple of examples where people reached financial freedom through real estate. And so I looked at stocks, and the 4% rule means generally that you want to save a couple $1 million and live off of 4%, which for me at $17 an hour with 3 kids and a lot of bad debt would take decades, if ever. Some people start and grow a business to the point where someone else runs it so that you can be financially free. And I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm lazy. I mentioned that at the beginning. A lot of people say, I want to be an entrepreneur because I don't want a boss. Well, now every single customer with a Yelp account is your boss. And people say, I don't want to work a 40-hour week, so I want to be an entrepreneur. Well, an entrepreneur works 80 hours a week. So I didn't want any of that. So I looked at real estate. My brother has 10 paid off rentals. He used a home equity line of credit on his property, purchased mobile homes on acreage that were basically falling apart. And then he spent his time and energy to fix them up and make really nice rentals. And he got to 10, closed down his business. He's been retired for 7 years now. And he basically does whatever he wants with over $10,000 a month in cash flow coming in that he doesn't have to get out of bed for. And I thought, why am I not trying to do that? I'm trying to work for these pensions, and the opportunity to get the pension keeps getting taken away. But I didn't have any equity in my house. I was actually upside down in the house I was living in. I couldn't even give it away. And I don't have a skill set. I am not handy. I can switch out an electric socket, but maybe do some drywall, but I am not going to do an entire project. I've actually never done a rehab. It took me from that starting position I was in, it took me 8 years to reach financial, so bad debt free, got rid of the bad debt and made work optional, had more money coming in from rental properties than what it cost me to live. But I didn't have the options that I saw. My other friend has over 30 units, but he ran a Windermere office and he had 19 agents working for him. So he literally had decades to sit back, wait for the right deals to walk in the door and just buy those. I didn't have their resources, but I have to live somewhere. And my debt to income ratio was bad because I wasn't making a lot of money and I had a bunch of debt. I owned the house I was in, but I was upside down. So I owed more on it. So I couldn't sell it and use the equity to buy something else. I couldn't take out a refinance or a home equity line of credit. So the thing I had to put in was time. I moved from my house into an apartment and rented the house out. First year went really bad because I didn't educate myself and I basically set it up for failure. But after 2 years of getting rental income on my tax returns, lenders will look at rental income, 75% of it, in my debt to income ratio. So at that point, I was able to buy a duplex. I moved down to one side, rented out the other. The apartment I was living in cost me about $1,500 a month. When I moved into the duplex, my housing costs dropped to $300 a month. So that's about a $1,200 a month addition to my savings rate when I was not making a lot of money. That's huge. It was another 2 years until I purchased another duplex. And then around that time, so I had the house that was rented out, and then I was living in a duplex and I owned an investment duplex. This thing starts to happen that I call the income snowball. Rents go up, mortgages stay the same. I reduced my housing expense, which for most of us is our largest expense. A lot of people talk about getting rid of their, saving money on coffee and not going to Starbucks. And you could save $5 or $10 a day. Well, that's $300-400 a month, even if you go every day. $1,200 a month without really having to change anything, just where I lived, was huge. And then the cash flow from the rent, the unit started to add up. The next duplex took less than 2 years because I saved the down payment sooner. And then after that, at about the 8-year mark, I moved into a fourplex, which is my second house hack. And the really cool thing about the second house hack is it amplifies the effect. Moving into that first duplex reduced my housing expenses. When I moved into the fourplex, when I first moved in, I was being paid $1,700 a month to live in this unit. It's at $2,500 a month now because of another strategy that I want to talk about. But when I moved out of the duplex, I also get to rent out the unit I was living in. So that now cash flows, and where I'm living cash flows. So the hardest part about investing is those first 4 or 5 years. This is when we have to be frugal. This is when we have to have discipline. And the biggest thing is patience. Because when we're starting out, we don't have confidence that it's going to work. Almost anybody who has gotten to your point where you have 20 rentals, or I have 16 now, 16 units, we just tell people, here's what I did. This is how you do it. And if we lost everything and started over, we would know exactly what we would do. We would repeat the process that we know that worked. But that new investor that's watching this video right now has this big cloud of doubt because they haven't done it yet. And they don't know that this isn't complicated. Like rental properties is very simple. That doesn't make it easy. It makes it simple. All of my deals so far have been from the MLS using traditional lending, very easy to duplicate. We can have up to 10 mortgages in our own name before we have to go with commercial lending. So it's very easy to scale to those first 10 properties. One of the reasons why I like duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes is because 10 of those is 20 to 30 units. Whereas if you have single family houses, 10 mortgages in your name means you have 10 single family houses. So it scales a little bit faster. But up to 4 units, I'm able to use residential lending. That's 30-year fixed rate debt. I don't have to have a loan reevaluation period or a balloon payment or an adjustable rate mortgage. And you've had some great guests on your show, on your channel here. I watch a lot of it. I've seen Michael Zuber, Millennial Mike, April Crosley. If you have a lumberjack landlord episode, I haven't seen it yet, but if not, you should get him on here.
I will.
There are some really great different strategies. So you have over 20 rentals and you invest in other asset classes. Michael Zuber has almost 200 units and he's done flips. He's done the Burr method. Matt the Lumberjack Landlord has over 100 units. He's doing rehabs. He's also house hacked. April Crosley has done flips. She got into a syndication, so she's putting her money to work with very little work of her own. And here's where it seems a little odd when I talk about the reason why I share my content. There is no one right way to invest, but there is a one right way for you. Each person has a way. So somebody's going to identify with April. Somebody's going to identify with Matt. Somebody's going to like what you do. Somebody is going to be lazy and have this goal. Here was my goal. I wanted to make work optional. That happened at 7 units. When I had the house and 3 duplexes, I had 7 units. I was making more money, $100 more take home after all expenses and setting aside for repairs and maintenance and vacancy than I was making when I was a police officer without having to get out of bed.
Right. And with that being said, like, I'm curious, your average cash flow per unit, a lot of times you might have heard me say I shoot for at least $250 per unit. What's your goal when you buy a place? Like, you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. So I'm just curious, what's your goal?
So it's going to sound like I have that goal when I explain it, but I only understand this because I've explained it to people. That was never my goal. I never looked at a per door goal or a number of units goal. I go on the cash on cash return on investment. So I've never done a home equity line of credit. I've never done a cash out refinance. I do not recycle capital. I want to save a down payment and take that money from a bank and put it in a property. I'm not spending it. I'm moving it from the bank to the property and then leave it there. Because if I can invest $100,000 into a property and I get a 10% cash on cash return. So I don't care if it has 1 door or 4 doors. If I put $100,000 into that property, that means that I'm going to get $10,000 every year for the rest of my life. And that's starting year 1. At about year 3, it's grown to 20% without me really having to do much because, as I said earlier, rents go up, mortgages stay the same. So per door, I was averaging in 2020 about $450 per door. End of 2021, beginning of 2022, I'm averaging $630 per door now because of this strategy that I have that gets my tenants to request a rent increase. My tenants ask me to raise their rent and the mortgages stay the same. So this is where patience and time comes in. This all doesn't happen in the first year. It might be 2 or 3 years later when you're using the strategy again that you start seeing that 20% return. So right now with 16 doors, and I'm very transparent. I understand this because Michael Zuber, Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, their portfolios are so big when they start talking numbers. I've seen somebody in the comments say, when Matt talks, it sounds like he's bragging, and he's not. He's sharing, look, a 9th grade dropout, which is what Matt the Lumberjack Landlord is, can get to this point. Here's what the numbers look like. It's worth the first 4 to 5 years that are not good to get there, right? So he's not bragging. So I share my numbers because they're smaller. So it's a little more reasonable. It doesn't sound like I'm bragging. But $630 or so per door, 16 doors, profits about $128,000 a year after principal, interest, taxes, insurance, after setting aside for repair, maintenance, and vacancy. I pretty much lived most of my life never thinking I would have a 6-figure job, let alone 6 figures of money coming in that I don't have to work for. I do self-manage, so I do have to work for it, but it's about 2 hours a month to self-manage 16 properties. So it does take some strategies and getting some systems in place. And that's why on my channel, I always make 10-minute or so videos that talk specifically how to screen a tenant, how to find an agent, how to find your lease, all the little steps that you want to do. Because once you make it a system, it almost takes no effort. And even 2 hours a month, that's when something goes wrong. So.
Right. That's interesting. You covered a lot of ground right there. So one thing I'm sure a lot of folks are curious about, and I know what you call this strategy from watching your videos, but you just said basically your tenants are requesting a rent increase. correct? Can you
Correct.
tell us a little, right? Go ahead and tell us what you call that, and just, if you can, a little bit of details about how that all works out.
Sure. A lot of people, when we're looking at buying a rental property, we can't find good deals. And one of the metrics that people do, especially if they're listening to their agent who's been around for a long time and has industry knowledge, because a lot of people will say, you need to look at the rents that the property is getting now, because that's the numbers you're going to run. And that's not how I do it. My strategy is called the binder. And using this strategy, I prefer to buy rent ready or already occupied properties. I want somebody living in the property already, because most people want a vacant property where they can do a rehab and get area market rents. I'm really lazy. I've never done a rehab. I like to buy a property that has somebody living in it, because generally, and this is how the strategy started, but it works on existing tenants too. I would inherit tenants. Generally, when a property is sold, the previous owner is wanting to get out of the business. They haven't paid attention to the property for a few years. Some maintenance things have fallen behind. They haven't raised rents. They haven't wanted to bother with the tenant because they don't want turnover. So they've just kind of been backing out. So that tenant is far below area market rents. So you need to, like Michael Zuber says, do the work, know the area average rents in your area. I'll buy the property. I don't use the binder strategy right away, because I didn't get to screen those tenants. I want to wait a couple of months to find out if they pay their rent on time, if I get noise complaints, if they call me for really trivial things. Like, I want to kind of screen to make sure these are tenants that I want to keep. About 2 months in, once I realized that I do want to keep them, understand legally you are bound by the existing lease. So if they have a lease with any time remaining on it, you have to honor that. Most of my tenants I've seen, they've been in there for so long, they're all on month-to-month leases. So then you're bound by what your area requires. So if you're in California and you have rent control, that's a different type of investing that I personally wouldn't want to invest there, because I don't like rent control. So let's say area average rents. I'm going to use an example. I purchased a duplex last year, $400,000. Basically exactly the same duplex I purchased in 2018 for $300,000. So prices have gone up. The current tenants were paying $1,100 and something for rent. If you ran the numbers on that, ran it through like the CDS rental calculator app, it was almost a break-even deal. Not worth pursuing at the $1,100 and something rents. Area average rents are $1,550 and $1,600. So I'm not going to go and talk to the tenants and put them at $1,600, because that's a huge jump for them. And I didn't do anything. I didn't have to do a rehab or anything. But what I'll do is I call it a binder, because I actually take, and I don't have it here, it's in my truck because I just did the binder last week. I have a binder, a 3-ring binder, where the first page is a picture from Redfin or Zillow of the property with the Redfin or Zestimate or whatever the value they think it is. And then it has the last sale. So what I paid for it on there. That's the front page. The next page is a map of the area with the rentals for rent that have the same number of units, and if it has a garage or whatever amenities as similar as I can get it. Then each page after that is those rentals for rent. So I buy this duplex in May of last year. I go in after a couple of months to make sure the tenants are quality tenants, which both of them were. I show them the binder. Most tenants don't know how much properties cost. They just know they're expensive. That's why they're renting sometimes. So when they see $400,000 was the purchase price, and I did negotiate it down $2,500, but it was right around there when I did it. That's a huge number. And then I show them the area average rents. Here's the map with the places that are for rent around here. Each page showed several, same exact size, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms for $1,575, $1,600, $1,700, all in that range. They're in the $1,100 range. I tell them, look, I don't want to come in and just set the rents. Your rents made sense to the previous owner who bought it decades ago at the price they had, but I just paid this price. And this is what the Zestimate says it's worth. So taxes are going to be adjusted to this here, because the state resets every year, like Texas. And then my insurance is going to cost more for replacement. Slide them the binder, let them look through it, and ask them what they think is fair. What tenant has ever been involved in the conversation to set their rents? So far, 100% of the time, and not just on my units, but on many units that I've worked with people that I'm helping reach financial freedom, no tenant has said, I want the rent to go down. No tenant has said, I want the rent to stay the same. And no tenant has asked for the rent to go up to the area average. Those are the 3 scenarios that have never happened. Almost every tenant takes the rent to 10% or so below the area average. So those 2 units that were in the 1100s are now both at 1460. The tenants asked for a $310 rent increase and then thanked me when I acquiesced. When I said, I could get 1600 if you move out and I rehab this place, but I don't want to displace you. So 1460, that's kind of fair for both sides. And a compromise is when both sides lose something. So you're getting an increase. I'm not getting what I could. We signed a new lease. And then sometimes if I want a longer lease, like if I want a 2-year lease, I'll tell the tenants, if you want to protect this to stop from getting a big increase next year, we could sign a 2-year lease. And then I don't always do that. I kind of want some leases each year to pop up. And that strategy is called the binder. It's why I'm able to find deals on the MLS. So I'm not doing anything off market, no mailers, I was listening to your interview with April Crosley, and she's talking about all the work that it takes for her flips and all the work that goes into finding the deal. And I'm like, lazy, very lazy. So if I can look at properties on the MLS and I know my area and I know what the area average rents are, I'm still finding cash flowing deals on the MLS. In November of last year, I put my purchase on hold, actually October, and I helped a friend. I handheld walked through, here's how you set up your auto search, here's how you make your offers. And we found a deal, and I told her this deal is one I would go for. So she purchased it. She was able to confidently purchase it because here's the deal I made. This was such a good deal in November. If this deal isn't one you like and you don't think you're making money, I'll buy it for whatever you paid. So she went in with the confidence knowing that if she completely failed, I'm going to buy it from her.
Okay.
I purchased a duplex in 2018 for $298,000. She's 6 houses away, 6 properties. She paid $555,000. It's the same size duplex. It's a tiny, it's got like half a bathroom better, but they're 6 houses away. 300,000 basically, 555,000. Her deal was better. And most people will go, no, she paid way too much because you only paid 300,000. Right. My interest rate was 6%. Hers is 3.1. My rent was 11 and 1,200. Hers is 2,200. So half the rates, double the rents. My cash flow year 1 was 10%. Her cash flow year 1, 17%. My deal looks great now because time in the market always beats timing the market. My rents have gone up. I refinanced to a better rate. So yeah, I've got a great deal. I'm super happy with it. I would have bought her deal all day long. And I'm glad it's working out for her. She's making $1,350 a month. No, if it's 1,400, where she's at. Yeah, profit on her first deal. Super happy for her.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I know you said you watched some of my videos, you've seen some of the interviews, but I don't know if you saw the first interview I did. It was a young man named Robbie. He was a tenant in my triplex, and I became friends with him, so I ended up selling him the triplex. So what I'm going to do is, he watches some of my videos, but I'm going to encourage him to watch this video so he can hear about the binder strategy, because I don't think I've told him about that. So he can hear he can hear you describe how you do it. And then he in turn can talk to his other 2 tenants in the building, because he lives in the building, and do the exact same thing. Because right now rents are under what market value is in that area because rents have gone up so much. And at the same time, as you may know, then I use property managers for the majority of my properties now. I do self-manage just one from 1,000 miles away, but I know the tenant and we have a good relationship, so that's fine. But my property managers, they've been successful at increasing rents, and they watch some of my videos, but again, I'm going to encourage them to watch this one because they may want to do something similar to this.
Well, there's 2 things with it. The first, in a little over 10 years of investing now, I've had 2 tenant turnovers ever. And I've never, you take the first tenant out in that first house when I didn't know what it was doing, and I tried to make every mistake possible. Since that tenant, I've never had a late or missing rent payment and very little turnover. One tenant inherited a house. Another tenant was elderly, went to the hospital, passed away, and then his wife went to assisted care. So that's my 2 tenant turnovers. To me, the power of the binder is it helps the lazy. I don't have to rehab a place, screen tenants, place tenants, educate a tenant on how the system works for me. It's very simple, very, very steady, like 2 hours a month to manage, because these tenants I don't generally have tenant turnover. And the second thing is, it started from inherited tenants. So your student who purchased you're not student, maybe tenant who purchased the triplex. The binder strategy works on existing tenants too. So my plan usually was buy the property, use the binder strategy after a couple of months, and then every other year I would do a 5% increase. And for 2013, 2018 or so, that worked fine. I kept up with where I wanted to be. In 2020 and 2021, rents have gone up so much that I used the binder strategy on existing tenants. I went back and I sat down and I said, here's what's happening to area average rents. Here's my costs have gone up. My insurance has gone up. My property, one county property taxes went up 20%. And so I could say my expenses have gone up. Here's what you would be paying if you moved out and found another place similar to this in the area. Same thing. What do you think would be fair? I just did a triplex. I only have one triplex. I have one triplex, one fourplex, the rest are duplexes in that single family. So 310, 325 was the rent increases on a triplex. So a $955 pay raise because I went and had 3 20-minute conversations. Tenants are happy. They're still getting a good deal. They're still below what, because rent skyrocketed. That was a 28% increase for the because really my triplex is a house and a duplex. The duplex went up to 310 each side. The house went up 325. They're still getting better than what they would if they moved into anything in that area. And a part of me was actually hoping that one of them would move out because I wanted to try Airbnb for the first time so I could make videos. But because all mine right now are all long-term tenants. Another hint for a new investor, a tip, is lenders like to see more than 3 months remaining on leases, and then they'll use 75% of that rental income in your debt to income ratio. When you're adding those first 10 mortgages, that really matters. Once you get over 10 and you start dealing with commercial loans, your own personal stuff doesn't matter as much. But that's one of the ways that I am able to add more mortgages while I'm not increasing my income for the debt to income ratio.
Right. That's interesting because you've got me thinking now. And what I may do, my one property that I have in Virginia, where I know the tenant, she's a very nice person. She has a disability. So I want to keep her there as long as possible because she's a very nice person. We get along. And when she retires, she wants to move where her brother can help her out. So I'm willing to work with her and help her out. But my wife and I, sometimes we talk about, well, we need to go back and visit that area because we lived there for like 23 years. We have friends. So perhaps I'll time my visit for when her lease is like 60 days away from expiring. And maybe I'll do the exact same thing. I'll have a binder with me, sit down, have a nice conversation with her and show her the binder. And she's very smart. She actually has a rental property of her own in a different part of the state. So she'll understand exactly where I'm coming from. And I'll let her choose what her next rent amount will be.
So far, my experience has been tenants really like the transparency. I am sharing information that they could find online. They could have went to Zillow or Redfin and saw the purchase price. They can look at apartments.com or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace to see what these places are. I'm finding within the last week, current printed out forms that say, this is another 2-bedroom, 1-bath in, 3 streets away. And this is what it's renting for currently. And then I never say, so because the rents are so high, I'm raising your rent. It's a question. Because it's a conversation. I have had one time where a tenant goes, well, I think, like a $70 rent increase would be fine. Okay. And then I just point out, okay, that's a good starting point. A $70 increase would put you about $400 less than the area average. So we kept talking and ended up with like $250 or something, but it's a conversation. It's not decided. And you're logically pointing out, it is possible. Somebody says, someday some tenant's going to say, well, I don't want the rent to raise at all. Okay, we're not renewing your lease. I can't afford to lose this much money. I gave you the option to see all of the data, what I could get, what you're paying, what's fair. And if you think fair is for me to keep losing money, then I'm not going to renew the lease. I've never seen that. I've never seen a tenant who wasn't able to logically go, even with a $325 rent increase, I'm getting a good deal.
Right. I like that because, on my channel, I try to be fairly transparent without going down to the exact detail of what I make or anything. But I always believe in the power of education. And I like the idea, say it's my tenant who's buying my triplex. When I met him, he's a small business owner, and I knew he'd be the perfect person that could rent for me for several years and perhaps buy the building, live in it to reduce his housing expenses, and then begin to grow his portfolio. And I have currently I have 2 different property managers, one in Alabama, one up in Indiana. But I am going to sell my properties in Alabama. But in Indiana, where I'm more heavily focused, the property managers do a great job, they have a great relationship, but if I could encourage them to be just a little more transparent, because the feedback I get, quite a few of those tenants will tell the property manager, they don't know my name, they don't know who the landlord is, but they'll make comments about the rich landlord. And I'm not rich, I'm not poor, but I'm not rich either. But if my property manager would be willing to use the binder strategy, and they could show them, this is what the owner paid, this is what the average market rent is, your rent is, some of my rents are $400 under what the current market value is. And
the perfect time to use that strategy, because you have so much that you would gain, and the tenant would feel like they were getting a good deal, and they would feel like they were included in a conversation that they never got to be before.
Right. Very true. Very true. And let me ask you this. I had coffee this afternoon with a young lady who is preparing to make an offer to buy her first rental. And if you were, without knowing this person, if you were speaking with someone, they're, say, roughly 15 years younger than me, so they're not a kid, but they're not my age, and they're looking to buy their first rental, but they haven't bought it yet. Is there any piece of advice that you would give to a person like that?
First, the encouragement, talking to them. I think it's great that you're doing that. I like, one of the reasons why I watch your channel is the purpose of my content is to help the average person realize that you can make work optional. You can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, even if you're not starting from a good position. I wasn't in a good position. It took 8 years. If somebody's in a better position, it might take less. If they're in a worse position, it might take more. So I average it out to 10. There are basically 6 or 7 steps to getting started in real estate. So if she's getting ready to buy that first property, I would, if I was sitting with them, I would ask some questions. Where do you live? What type of property do you want to invest in? What is your goal? Because only the nerds watching will understand this. I'm a gamer. I play all kinds of video games. I have a VR system. I've been playing Zenith for, 2 or 3 weeks now. Whenever you're building a character in a video game, you want to look at the end. What do I want this character to end up like? So you know the best path to get there. Real estate investing is exactly the same. If you're Michael Zuber and you want a massive rental portfolio where his information is good, it's easy to duplicate. There's no secret sauce. It is literally one rental at a time. You can do that. If your goal is to be diversified the way you are in different asset classes, you would start investing differently. My goal was just to get where work was optional. So here's the step. So the path you take will be different once you've narrowed down the strategies you're going to use. But the first few steps for almost all of us are the same, no matter what position you're in or what your end goal is. Step 1 is learn how to save. We have to figure out how to live on less than we make, or this is never going to work. Second, work on your credit score. Because even with some asset-based lendings or non-QM loans, our credit score is a factor. Our debt-to-income ratio and work history might not be, but they do look at your credit score. The goal should be a 740 or higher, because that gets you the best rates, most likelihood to qualify for lending. Third step, all of this happens before you talk to a real estate agent. Third step is to talk to a lender. Find out what your options are. How much can you borrow based on your background, your work, your credit, all that kind of stuff. Then you need to pick a strategy. Are you going to do short-term rentals, long-term rentals, storage, commercial, rent to a restaurant or a store? Narrow down that, because then you can learn what you want to do. And a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they'll reach out to someone like you or to someone like me and say, hey, I would like to invest. Can you be my mentor? Well, if somebody wants to do the BRRRR method, no. If somebody wants to flip, no. If somebody wants to wholesale, no. So if they're just looking at getting into real estate, I can't help with 4 or 5 of the strategies that people use. If you want to do buy and hold, long-term investing, rent ready or already occupied properties right from the MLS using traditional lending, I'm your mentor. That's literally what my content's going to cover. So if she picks the strategy and starts learning the basics, then it's going to be really easier for her, and it will be much easier for her to find the mentor that makes sense for what she's trying to do. Because I would try to help somebody doing a BRRRR. I would tell them, look, I've never done this. I have a list of reasons why I don't do the BRRRR method. It gets so much hype on the Bigger Pockets forums, but there's a ton of reasons why that's not a strategy to start with. Once you have several properties and you've learned the basics and you have the cash flow to support the mistakes you're going to make, then try a BRRRR. But that would be my advice to her. learn to save, credit score, lender, pick a strategy. Once you get to there, she'll know who to, at least the type of person to look for advice.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good. Sounds good. I have a feeling when people watch this video, they're gonna, like all the interviews I have, and I don't really call them interviews, even though I use that word. I'm just trying to have a conversation, and my goal is to get the other person talking more so everyone can get a different perspective. But you've thrown out a lot of great nuggets here that can help a lot of people out. So I really appreciate this.
One last little bit of education in your video.
Sure.
I run a truck driving school, my W-2. I still work at W-2, even though for 4 years now, work's been completely optional. I love what we do, so I'm going to continue working. But teaching truck driving, I've learned the human brain can retain 4 facts. The human brain can retain 3 facts. That's what we are limited to. We can retain, I can tell you 3 numbers, you can tell them back to me. When we get a 4th one, most people don't lose the 4th one. You lose all 4. So when you're watching content like this, when you come to Mazske Finance and you go, look, I want to learn from the people they're interviewing, have a pen and paper ready, hit the pause button, back up sometimes when you think that's something that you want to remember, because as that video goes, you're going to hear 1, 2, or 3 things that really make sense and you can totally learn from it. And then they throw out the 4th thing and all 4 have gone away unless you take notes. So I would recommend watching this video or April's video or Zuber's video with a pen and paper and write down the things that make the most sense to you.
That sounds good, because I've done, as I started watching YouTube videos after I got started investing in real estate, because I kind of jumped into it blindly. Unfortunately, I didn't fail and sink. So, but I've learned a lot from other investors as I was progressing through my journey. And I've done that myself. You know, before I started this channel, I was still in Virginia. I might grab a piece of paper and a pen, jot something down, and I would learn. I tried different strategies because I have used the Burr strategy. I have taken 401k loans and been successful with it. And anyway, we've done great advice. So we'll wrap this up in just a minute, but I appreciate this, Dion. Maybe we can do this again sometime. But before we sign off completely, is there any last words you want to say to the audience?
I do. I want to be sarcastic, but I'm not going to do that today.
You can if you want.
You, the person watching this video right now, you are going to be alive in 5 years. Start investing like it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I'm going to copy that line sometime and use it.
There you go. Feel free. The more we share it, the better, because so many, and this is where my nerd is going to show. So many stories come out about time travel. Back to the Future. Everybody was, you go back, you talk to your parents, they don't meet, you don't happen. Something changes, right? Some tiny little butterfly effect in the past can completely ruin your present. But nobody thinks about the tiny little changes we can make today that are going to have a huge impact on our future. People are paying rent for the next 5 years. If you have a roommate, look at what the next 5 years just changed. You didn't even buy a place. You didn't even learn how to invest. You just added a roommate, reduced your largest expense. If you buy a place, now you're gaining equity and you're having principal pay down. What if you buy a place and you have a roommate? Little tiny changes that you can make now, and in 5 years, your life looks totally different.
I agree. I love that. I mean, it's great. That's why, say with Robbie, you may never meet him. I'll see him again. He's going to visit me sometime, but he's young. He's like 27, 28, and he's set himself up for success in the future. And both my boys, I have 2 boys. My oldest is also 28. He has, I think, 5 rental houses. My youngest is 24. He's getting ready to buy his first. It's under contract now. But if everyone is to watch this video, because you watch my channel, you see I may get 20, 30, 40, 50 views. Some videos may get 100, maybe 200. But the more folks who watch this all the way to the end, they will, if they didn't do it in the beginning, when they hear you say get a pen and paper, that little light bulb will go off. They may go back, start taking notes. Or if they don't take notes on this video, they'll tune into your channel. Because before we sign off, tell everybody how they can watch you.
Well, I'm right here on Dion Talk. I'm right here on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom. I usually edit my videos because words are hard. But I tend to agree with the people who are going to be the most successful are usually watching videos like this to the end. the way YouTube works is in the beginning of a video, you need something that's a hook, something that tells the people, continue to watch this video. At the end, there's going to be something to pick up or whatever. But to set the tone of a conversation to where you're going to get something that you can retain out of it, it's usually going to happen after 10 or 15 minutes. So the people who go onto a video and watch 3 or 4 minutes and then go on to the next video, they're missing out on where the bulk of education happens.
Right. I agree. Well, Dion, I'm sure if we wanted to, we could probably sit here and talk for another hour or two. But we're going to have to wrap this up, because if you heard many of my videos, you know what I do most evenings. I call her the missus. The missus and myself, we will go out and take a walk in this beautiful weather here.
That's what I'm doing today. It's actually Northwest. We don't get many of them, but today it's nice. Sun's out, so I'm doing the same thing.
All right, sounds good. And my youngest son shot me a text earlier. He's actually stationed in LA right now. And he sent me a text saying it hit 88 degrees, which for this time of year in LA, that was extremely warm.
Yep.
So, all right, sounds good, Dion. All right, well, it's great talking to you, and I appreciate this. So for Dion and myself, Mazske Finance is signing out, and stay tuned because more great interviews will be coming. Thank you.